Anyway, I guess I've been asked to relate some stories and some events that have happened here in my family home where we all grew up. There was 6 of us kids in the family, and this house is very old. It's over 200 years old, and it has on the property lovely little cemetery. It's a private cemetery, and it is looked after by this family. And this land had pioneers on it, and a lot of the stones have broken down and gone. But there's a lovely big monument in the cemetery to some settlers that came from Kintyre, Scotland. And the only way you can sort of see that cemetery from this house is if you're looking out of one of the bedrooms upstairs, and you look across the field, and up on the hill is a little cemetery. Now, before my father bought this place, there was sort of stories about the house that said people would go by and sometimes see a face looking out the window, like they was waiting for somebody or looking for somebody. Also, or people who were working outside in the yard and knew there was no one in the house sometimes, but say they saw it. So the house has had sort of a bit of a history. My mother came here as a young bride, and she herself was quite sensitive to spirits and feelings and souls being around her. She used to say if she went into an old church that she could sometimes feel so crowded and almost crushed that there were so many souls and people around her that she sensed. Anyhow, when she came to this house, she sensed right away that there was a female spirit here, and that it was associated with sheep or wool, because she quite often smelled lanolin, which was a product of it, which is in sheep's wool, raw sheep's wool. And my mother, after she looked around and went up to the little graveyard and saw that on the monument, one of the names on the monument was Margaret, and she felt quite a feeling for that name, like it was almost like speaking to her. Anyhow, so my mother gave the spirit's name of Margaret. So we grew up with Margaret being here. Mom said she was a very kind, loving spirit, and there was nothing to ever be afraid of. And if we ever heard noises in the night or footsteps going upstairs and there's nobody up there, my mom said, oh, well, it's just Margaret. And sometimes Mom would come into the room and she would smell flowers, and sometimes she would smell lanolin, and she would say, oh, well, that must be Margaret. Now, all pioneers, people, farmers would always have sheep, because obviously they would grow their own, make their own, have it for wool and everything like that, make their clothes. And there was a spinning wheel found in the attic, and that story is going to be related a little further on, but it is associated with that room that's looking out onto the graveyard. There's quite an association there, and that story will be told by someone else. Anyhow, the person that was, out of us children, the person that was most sensitive to things and beings, and that is my younger brother. Now, he related a story to me not that long ago, which I had heard before, but he told it to me again. And he said it's so real to him as if it happened yesterday. Very, very vivid. And it was his first encounter with something which he couldn't explain. And being very young, he said he was only about 4 or 5 at the time it happened, he couldn't understand it, and it frightened him quite a bit. He said that one morning he woke up early, and wanted to, come downstairs, but he didn't hear any noise downstairs, so he went into my mother and father's room, and my mom said, no, it's too early to get up right now. Here, come cuddle down and try to go sleep for at least half an hour. Then we'll go down. And he wanted to have his breakfast and get going, so he just laid there and sort of just looked around the walls and kind of, is it time to go down now? No, not yet. Try to rest. And then he caught a movement out of the corner of his eye. Now, my mother's dressing table was right beside the bed, and it was the back of the dressing table was to the wall, was the same wall that the bed was on. So he just turned his head and looked, and he could look over almost the top of the dressing table. And he said he saw, now it makes no sense, and he doesn't understand it, and he doesn't know why, but he saw a black shape slowly rising up, and it ended up being a black top hat. Now, why it would be that, he has no idea. And he said it was almost as if someone had been crouching down beside the dressing table and was lifting their head up and to peek over the top. Now, he says, don't ask me why, I don't know. Obviously, he was very, very frightened and started screaming, crying, and needless to say, everybody got up in a hurry after that. But he said it's as vivid now as it was almost 50 years ago when it happened. So he says, I was not dreaming. I was wide awake. Now, he's always been an early bird, getting up early, and he still is. But he said, the first time that he ever had an experience that he couldn't understand, and of course, obviously, very frightened him a lot. Now, my mom related a couple of stories about my younger brother, and she said that when he was a young boy, about 9 or 10, he came in one day and said, Mom, who's that boy walking through the path down by the orchard? And Mom said, what boy? And now, the house here, the farm, at that time there were no other homes or houses or farms visible. There was fields and woods and us. And so they both turned and went and looked down at the orchard and didn't see anybody. Now, a little while later, now I don't know how much later, because Mom didn't really actually specify that, but she said he came in and he said to her, Mom, he said, you know the boy that wears those old clothes that I saw before? Well, he just walked through the dooryard and he went around the corner of the house. And he said, I thought, well, I'm going to see where he's going. And he turned the corner of the house and there was nobody there. Now, maybe something a little more recent. My dad died in 1991, and he and my mom were extremely close, loved each other to death. And my mom had a hard time getting over that. Pardon me. My mother also was a great animal lover and loved her pets immensely. And when a pet died, it was buried at the edge of the orchard. Now, my mom got sick in 2008, and about a month before she passed away, my brother would come down every weekend, and if he was working the weekend, he'd come down during the week. And we were very fortunate. We were able to keep Mom here at the house, and she didn't, we looked after her. And he came down maybe about 4 weeks before she passed away, and he came in and he said to me, I seen Dad. And I just sort of looked at him and said, what? And I said, well, where? And he said, he's in the orchard and he's got the animals with him. And I said, why? I said, did he say anything? And he said, no. He just seems to be just sitting there quietly waiting. And he said, don't ask me to explain to you how I can see him, but he's there. And then the next weekend he came down. He said to me, he said, Dad's still there. And he's still waiting, but he's come closer to the house. But he won't come in the house. Now, shortly after that, of course, my mom passed away. I was the only one here with her when she did pass away that night. Now, I didn't see or sense anything. I'm not the most open one, I guess, for the spirits to visit in this family. But maybe the others sensed things and they just didn't say anything. I don't know. Now, 2 weeks after my mom died, my brother came down for the weekend, and he came down Friday. The rest, other people weren't going to be able to come until Saturday. So he was going to be spending the night alone here in the house by himself. And he decided, it was end of August, so he decided not to bother to go upstairs and make up the beds. He just took a blanket and laid on the couch. He was just so tired and exhausted after all the goings on. And he said he was so tired and he just went to sleep just like that. And he says he doesn't know how long he slept, but he went from sound asleep to being wide awake. And he had his face against the pillows, against the wall, more or less, and his back turned to the room. And he said the room was heavy, oppressive. Although there was a night light, he said he just felt like it was a darkness around. And he thought, I know there's someone standing behind me, or someone looking down at me. So he said he slowly turned around, and there was a man beside the couch staring down at him. And he was very tall, elderly, very, very thin, and gray. Everything about him was gray. And he said he just stared at his face because he had so much hatred on his face. My brother said, I got the immediate impression that he was extremely angry that I was there. He didn't want me there. He was really frustrated, and he wanted me gone and out. Now, my brother's had, experiences all his life, and he's not one to back away from anything. So he said, I said to him, look, I was bred and born here. I've lived here my whole life. This is my home. I want you to leave now. I mean you no harm, but you have to go. So go now. And then he said he turned on his side again and shut his eyes. Now, I expect he probably thought, what am I going to do if he doesn't go? But he said, and then at that time, time is, he says, I don't know how long it was, maybe, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, I don't know. He said, but in a not too long time, he said, all of a sudden I felt like the room becoming lighter, like it wasn't as heavy, that there was not as much, like, I won't say electricity feel in the room, but as much tension. And he said it was just like a breath of fresh air went through the room. And he said, I knew he'd gone. And he said, but just to make sure, I did turn around and look, and there was nobody there. Now, those are some little things which happened with my brother. Now, there's a spinning wheel, and all that story is going to come at a later date. And Michael has been seen with involved in some of those feelings and things. My sister now, she saw a lady. She was about a young teen, and she was going to go to bed one night, and she went in the lower hallway and started to put her foot on the steps to go up the steps, and she said all of a sudden she was aware that there was somebody on the stairs. And she immediately looked at the top of the stairs, and there standing was a lady who was all gray, and she was about middle-aged, and she had on her skirts were long to the floor, so old dress or something. And she said she looked at me for a few seconds, and then she just slowly faded away.
This is my sister Danica. Oh, I think I started too soon. Okay, this is my sister Danica, and she's going to be explaining a few experiences that a different uncle has had.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think it all started, he used to have the part of the spinning wheel always was in this room. And at one point he wanted to put it together for my grandmother. So he went to the attic, got all the pieces together, and set it up. And I guess the day that he had it all set up in here, for the next 4 nights, the spinning wheel, he'd wake up and the spinning wheel was turning, going through most of the night, I guess. But then it stopped after 4 nights. So another thing he had in here, one time he woke up and there was somebody standing in his room. He said he doesn't know who it was. It was just kind of, he was half asleep. He looked, there was like a figure standing there, and then he kind of just blinked a couple of times and then it vanished. And a few times while he was here, he would always sleep with the door locked. So this is like an old door, and this is the same lock that it used to have. So you would have to lock it from the inside with this latch like this, so it can't just open. You'd have to have this key in order to open it. If you were outside, it would just kind of, you'd flip it up like that. And if it was, a lot of times they would just keep it inside if you were locking the door, and then you would have to just open it. Well, you wouldn't, you just will open it like that. But you'd keep the key inside, so if no one could open it from the outside. So he'd wake up in the morning, and the door, would still be set to lock, but the door would be open. And they don't have any explanation for that. And the experience I had here last summer, we were here for a couple of nights, and one night I was just here with the kids, and I went to go in the back room, which is right below this room, in order to get some things for my mother, because she wasn't here and she was going to be coming in late. So I had to come by these stairs to go in the back room with a flashlight, because there was no light on. And anyway, got the things, but coming back through here, just had a weird feeling, got kind of freaked out, ended up running into the living room, because and something kind of told me don't look up the stairs. So I got all freaked out. So in about an hour later, Dan, don't look up these stairs. So in about an hour later, I had just, the kids were all sleeping. We were all in the living room. The kids were asleep, and I was just laying down, and I heard somebody run down the stairs. And we were the only people in the house, and I was the only person awake in the house, and my mom wasn't back yet. So it just sounded like a boom, 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 going down the stairs. And that was it. Okay.
All right. All right. So you got to do me now. I might as well get you to do me. That's perfect. Okay, so my experience was when I was probably around 18. I was sleeping here overnight. We were staying with my grandmother for a while. I was sleeping in this bedroom, and I was really scared, and I always heard the ghost stories and that, so I was a little freaked out. And it must have been like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I still hadn't fell asleep yet. And when I went to sleep, I shut the door like this, and I had it locked. And all of a sudden I heard, and then the door opened all on its own, and opened wide open. And there was no one there, and my sister and my grandmother were both sleeping downstairs, and that was it, and that's it. Okay. It's weird.
No. Ew.